Alright, so for your animal eye rough draft, hopefully you guys had some success researching your reference photo for the project. Just to kind of go over a couple things, when you do an up-close animal eye, you want to make sure that the eye is taking up the whole page. Okay, so you want it to be up close. Realistically, animal eyes can be this big, but when you zoom in, we are actually going to do what's called changing the scale of the eyeball. So when you think of scale, scale is how big or how small the overall image is. Okay, and it's changing the overall size of it to fit specifically to our sketchbook page. Okay, so that's scale. Now, the first thing we want to think about is how is the eyeball constructed? Okay, well, if you kind of like pulled these eyelids back, right, kind of gross, that eyeball is what shape? It's a circle. And more specifically, a three-dimensional circle is a sphere. So we're going to need to create some sort of sphere shape on our sketchbook so that we get the general idea of what the eyeball is going to look like in our drawing. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out where the middle of your page is and then where the middle of the eyeball is so that we can fit this nice and balanced on our paper and so that we have a quality composition, which you should know about from the intro video. Alright, so what you want to do is, what I like to do first is kind of lightly just get an idea. This is very lightly because I'm going to erase these. Just get an idea of where that center of the paper is. So I can divide it in half horizontally, divide it in half vertically. And then I want to put the eyeball right in the middle of my page. So what I like to do first is I like to take my wrist off the paper. I like to have my elbow off my paper and off the desk. And I'm just very lightly, I'm going to bend at the elbow and I'm going to draw a circle very lightly, and I can keep going until I get that circle right where I want it in the middle of the page. Okay, so sometimes you got to practice that a little bit. You're going to draw with your whole arm. Your wrist should not be bending. Okay, if you lock your wrist in place, okay, you're just trying to find that circle. All right, now this is my eyeball, right? So what I want to think about now is how much of my eyeball is covered up with the top eyelid and the bottom eyelid. Okay, so when you look at your reference, what you want to do is think about how far down does your eyeball go and how far up does your eyeball go. And you can kind of tell if you follow the inside of the circle, it probably comes up to about here and all the way down. So a lot of it's covered up. So what I like to do first is if I sketch in this little tear duct, it's kind of like a triangle, so you can just draw a little triangle. I can get an idea of how much of that's covered up. So that's my top eyelid. Okay, so I first sketch out the top eyelid, and then I'm going to sketch out the bottom eyelid, which it looks like doesn't cover up quite as much as the top eyelid. Okay, now do you notice how much I'm just sketching this out? You see all these lines in my paper? Alright, all those lines, I'm going to erase probably 90% of them. But what they do is they allow me to practice and figure out where specifically that is. And once I get that sketch done, I can now visualize and I can go in a little bit darker to make that more specific. Okay, now when I'm done with that, I can erase all these extra lines that I don't need because sometimes they get distracting and we just want to get rid of them as we go. Okay, so I can erase these and now I have a much cleaner top eyelid. So I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. Now I already have this tear duct, so I can kind of round this out a little bit more specifically, and I just want to follow the path of my sketch marks and just go in and refine the bottom of that eyelid. Okay, so would you agree that this looks similar to this? Alright, so what you want to do next is you're going to go in and you're going to start adding all the little details. Okay, once you get the shape kind of dialed in, you're going to go in and add all these little pieces of the eyeball that you see. Okay, so it's kind of divided up there. This actually extends, so you see how it goes in my picture. Kind of like this, and there's a little crease here, right? You got some thickness to the bottom eyelid, so it's almost like sketching in a parallel line to the bottom of the eyelid. The top actually comes way up here to where the eyeball would actually stop. Okay. The other little trick that you can do to get your angles right is if you hold your pencil up to your reference and your reference is it's nice and lined up with your paper, you can take your pencil, check the angle of the eye right here, drag it over, okay, and to make sure that it's the same angle. And you can do the same thing down here and down here. You can do the same thing here and here, right? So that just kind of helps check the angles out. One little thing with proportion, okay, so we have scale, which is the overall size. Okay, that's like changing the size of this. Well, when it comes to proportion, I know I'm kind of throwing these terms at you, but proportion is comparing the sizes of different parts of the eyeball to other parts of the eyeball. So the width should be about, the width of the actual eyeball should be the same length from this crease to the bottom of the eye. Okay, so like from all the way down here to up here. So if I want to check that on my paper, I'm going to take the width of my eyeball, and it should be about the same size. So do you notice that I'm a little bit off? So what I would want to do is I want to adjust my drawing. I could either raise this up here, okay, depending on what I think is needed. I could raise this up here, or I could lower this to make those proportions a little bit more accurate. Okay. Now all these little tricks that I'm talking about, that's what helps you create a very accurate rendering. Okay, so this is a rendering project where we are rendering from a specific reference, and we're trying to duplicate this image in our sketchbook. All right, once you get all this done, I would like to go in, and I'm going to try to get very specific with what's in this reflection so you can see the photographer actually. Okay, so I'm actually going to draw him in the reflection. I'm going to create this little horizon line. All right, I got all these little shapes going on, and I want to get this as accurate as possible because that's what's going to make it really look super realistic. Okay, so once you get all the details done, then you can go in and you can start shading, and you can shade it kind of quickly because I understand this is just a rough draft. So you can shade this in nice and quick and then move on from there. Okay, now remember, after you finish the rough draft, you're immediately going to go and you're going to start on your value scale. Once you finish these two prerequisites, these are your pre-requirements. Once you finish these two, you're going to be able to go on and move on to this final draft for the animal eye rendering project. Okay, and then one last thing with your rough draft, I just want to remind everybody, this counts as your sketchbook number 5. Okay, so you do not need to do 2 sketches this week. You are just doing the rough draft, and you're going to turn this in on Polaris on Friday for 30 process points that count towards your sketchbook number 5. Okay, good luck.